It is 6 p.m. here in Cairo, time for Egypt news, and we start straight away with the main headlines. Egypt holds joint military drills with Russia, Jordan and Pakistan to promote military cooperation. Under the directives of President Fattah al-Sisi, Egypt will launch the first satellite for communication purposes dubbed Tiba-1. And new security patrols launched in northern Syria involving Turkish and Russian forces. Welcome back. Joint Egyptian-Russian drills involving the air defense forces from both countries will launch today. Dubbed Arrow of Friendship, the joint drills take place in Egypt for the first time and will continue for 2 weeks with the aim of exchanging expertise on the latest air defense technologies. Air Defense Forces Commander Ali Fahmy told an opening ceremony that the implementation of the exercises on the Egyptian soil emphasizes the deep partnership and strategic cooperation linking Russia and Egypt. Egyptian-Jordanian military drills Aqaba 5 will conclude today with the specialized joint operation to destroy the terrorist depot inside the border village. Units of the Special Land, Maritime and Air Forces from both countries took part in the exercises that were held in both the Southern Military Zone and the Red Sea Operations Zone. Trilateral military exercises joined by the special forces from Egypt, Pakistan and Jordan will launch today in Pakistan with the participation of several other countries as observers. Codenamed Dawn of the East, the drills are part of the efforts to develop the military relations between the three countries to the level of partnership. The exercises aim at upgrading the capabilities in fighting terrorism, conducting search and inspection operations, diffusing explosives, and training on-field first aid services. Under the directives of President Fattah al-Sisi to develop the communication and information technology sector, Egypt will launch the first satellite for communication purposes dubbed Tiba-1. The satellite will provide communication services for the commercial and governmental sectors. Two French mega international companies cooperated to manufacture the satellite. The satellite is due to provide the needed coverage to Egypt, North African countries, and the Nile Basin countries. It will also help in enhancing the development process through providing wide communication and internet infrastructure to cover the remote areas, as well as promoting the petroleum, energy, education, and health sectors. Meanwhile, the satellite will support the state bodies in combating crime and terrorism that threaten the stability and security of nations. New security patrols were launched in northern Syria, this time involving the Turkish and the Russian forces, a day after the American forces began the other patrols, while both the Syrian and the Kurdish forces had been redeployed recently. More on the situation of the Syrian-Turkish borders in the upcoming report.
Turkey started joint patrols with Russia in northern Syria on Friday to verify whether Kurdish forces have withdrawn from a key border zone in compliance with the deal reached between the two governments. Russia and Kurdish withdrawal from a band of territory along the border was now complete in line with an agreement signed with Turkey in the Black Sea resort of Sochi last week that halted a Turkish operation launched against Kurdish forces in northeastern Syria on October 9th. Turkey says it intends to set up a safe zone 30 kilometers deep in which some of the 3.6 million Syrian refugees it's hosting could be resettled. The joint Turkish-Russian patrols began with ground and air units near the border town of Dirbasiya, from which Kurdish fighters have already pulled out. They add to the complicated mix of forces operating along the frontier, including U.S. troops who patrolled an eastern section for the first time since American President Donald Trump said last month that troops were withdrawing. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad said that the Sochi agreement was temporary and will eventually pave the way for his government to retake Syria's northeast. Upon mediation from Russia, meanwhile, the Turkish Defense Ministry said Turkey freed 18 Syrian government soldiers who its forces captured in northeastern Syria. The troops in question were captured by Turkey earlier in the week in the vicinity of the key border town of Ras Al Ain. On the political front, a small Syrian group held as a landmark the first meeting of a committee comprising Syrian government and opposition negotiators tasked with amending the country's constitution. A communique by the group that include Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Germany, the United States and France said they supported efforts to provide a safe and fair environment in Syria needed for holding free elections under UN supervision. On Wednesday, Syrian government and opposition negotiators sat face-to-face in Geneva for the launch of the Constitutional Review Committee's work.
The American President Donald Trump's administration is withholding $105 million in security aid for Lebanon 2 days after the resignation of Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri. The State Department told the Congress that the White House Budget Office and the National Security Council decided to withhold the foreign military assistance. The administration had sought approval for the assistance starting in May, arguing that it was crucial for Lebanon to be able to protect its borders. In Iraq, the top cleric warned the foreign actors against interfering in the country's anti-government protests as they entered the second month, despite the pledges of reform and violence that has left over 250 dead. This came as thousands of Iraqis thronged central Baghdad, demanding the downfall of the political elite in what was expected to become the biggest day of mass anti-government demonstrations since the fall of Saddam Hussein. Protests have accelerated in recent days, drawing huge crowds from across the Iraqi divides to reject the political parties in power since 2003. The United States extended the sanctions on Iran by taking aim at the construction sector, which Washington linked to the country's Revolutionary Guards. The sanctions would also target 4 strategic materials as being used in connection with the Iranian nuclear, military, or ballistic missile program. Tehran has hit back by suspending the compliance with parts of the nuclear deal until sanctions relief is restored. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's office has defended the Brexit deal with the European Union after the American President Donald Trump warned it would make it impossible for the two nations to strike a future trade agreement. Johnson struck the terms for the UK's departure with Brussels earlier this month, but has been unable to push it through the Parliament. He hopes a general election will break the deadlock, giving him a majority that will help him get the enabling legislation approved. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi signed wide-ranging agreements in New Delhi to deepen the strategic cooperation and exchanged notes on ways to boosting bilateral trade. Merkel is in India on a 3-day visit. Bilateral trade between the two countries rose to $24.06 billion in the 2018-19 fiscal year ending in March from $22 billion the previous year, while the German companies have invested nearly $12 billion in India since 2000. The Suez Canal Authority announced that the water route hit the highest monthly revenue in its history, registering $550 million. The authority added in a statement that the Suez Canal registered unprecedented records during the month of October in revenues and in the number of ships passing through the vital waterway. Nearly 197 ships passed through the canal in both directions, an increase of 8% compared to October of 2018. The Egyptian stock market gained nearly £12.3 billion during October to reach £727.7 billion, compared to £715.4 billion during September, up 1.7%. A monthly report released by the stock market showed the rise in the bourse indices, with the benchmark EGX 30 index adding 2.1%. The medium-capped index, the EGX 70, was also up 3.6%, and the more expanded index, the EGX 100, edged higher 3.1%. In Lebanon, the banks reopened for the first time in 2 weeks as the country began to return to normal following mass demonstrations for the political change. Large queues of people rushed in as soon as the doors opened to cash in the salaries and make transfers. There has been concern that the reopening of the banks will be accompanied by a devaluation of the Lebanese pound, but the Lebanese central bank said that the currency was still pegged to the greenback at £1,507 to the dollar. And Saudi Arabia said it expects that the budget deficit to widen next year to 187 billion riyals, projecting a shortfall for the 7th year in a row amid low oil prices. Saudi Finance Minister said in a statement that the data marks a substantial increase from a projected budget deficit of 131 billion riyals for the year. The world's top crude exporter has posted a budget deficit since 2014, when a crash in oil prices shrank the Saudi Arabia revenues. Prices have partially recovered since then, but in the face of the budget deficits, the OPEC kingpin has introduced a raft of reforms to diversify the economy away from oil. Egyptian duo Raneem Al-Walili and Noor Al-Shirbini will meet in the final of the Women's World Championship after wins over compatriots Nouran Gohar and Hania Al-Hamami respectively. Al-Walili came from a game down to beat Gohar 2-11, 11-7, 11-7 and 11-5 in 38 minutes. Al-Shirbini had a straightforward victory over Al-Hamami, winning 11-6, 11-2, 11-5 in 34 minutes. Al-Ahli held the first training camp at Al-Ahli Youth Stadium in Dubai as the first phase of the preparation period that the team is going through was launched. The Red Devils arrived to the United Arab Emirates overnight for a 6-day training camp. The camp was held before facing Etoile de Sahel of Tunis at the end of November. Zamalek started a private camp in the 6th of October city in preparation for the resumption of the Premier League. Most of the Whites players participated in the camp, except for the goalkeepers Muhammad Subhi, Muhammad Abdussalam, Imam Ashur and Mustafa Muhammad, for attending another camp in preparation for the African Championship for players under 23. Also missed the camp were Ferjani Sasi, Khalid Boutayib and Rida Mahmoud due to injury. And AC Milan avoided a Halloween scare by beating Serie A struggler Spal 1-0 at the San Siro to give coach Stefano Pioli the first win since replacing the sacked Marco Giampaolo. The victory lifted Milan into the top 10 with 13 points from 10 games, while Spal remained at second bottom with 7. Milan are at home to the 5th placed Lazio on Sunday. And this brings us to the end of Egypt News for today. Thank you for watching and goodbye.